And welcome back to the next episode of the Fit Affiliate podcast. Back to a smaller room this week. I've got my two regular buddies sitting right alongside me as we wrap up our final episode for the year, which is exciting. We should have worn our festive gear, gentlemen, but how are you?
Fantastic.
I'm good. I forgot. Yeah, small room. We had like 9 people on last week, and there was like
Five,
no
but yes.
you couldn't see any squares, and you couldn't read face language. We were just rolling, but that was cool with
Yeah.
Tyson.
It's a party.
It was very cool. So today I thought this was appropriate timing to talk about something that's we value as important at Fit Affiliate, and that's setting ourselves up for success for the forward year by also incorporating a review on the previous year, the year that we're just exiting. So it's something we haven't talked about before. So I thought it was a good opportunity today that while people have got some downtime, it might be something that they can implement and start to look at as they try and move their own affiliates forward. And go.
I think I made a post last night in the Founders League kind of relating to that. It was so weird. I had to get an emotion out when it came to the laundry thing, but it was, to sum it up, feel free to hop in the group to get this amazing brain dump. Sometimes me and Tony are trying to be the only people not to speak, so we'd like for the existing people to hop up theirs, because I'm not nervous. But anyway, when you take your laundry off and if you don't unfold it, like in the moment you're like, yeah, whatever. But in that moment, you're also probably not irritated to be like, oh, let me just turn it right side in. But when you're folding that laundry, you're leaving that chance of opportunity. That kind of reminds me of the year-end review a little bit, because a year-end review, I bet people listening are scared as shit to truly do a year-end review unless you have a coach.
And I bet that usually the year-end review will be, well, this year was shit. How do I make next year better? And then that's all they're taking it as that surface level, and they go, oh well, can't wait for the end of year to roll over. Next year will be better, without having any active intention towards that. And interestingly, Tony asked me a question today in a response to my check-in about being an active participant or active observer in your life, or basically just sitting observing, which is what people can tend to do, is go, oh well, the year happened, and they just let it go and then don't do anything about either correcting or changing the course or owning anything that can reframe how the next year might look. I've got you, Tony.
Yeah, I don't know what's happening with the microphone does not want a year-end reflection.
The microphone is like, I'm out. I've listened to too much of this for the last 3 seasons.
Started yesterday, and then it's been doing. I don't know if it's the cable, an excuse to have to get another microphone, or also I suppose I could probably just switch it. Anyway, to Andrew's point, yeah, and most people don't. Everybody loves to set goals. I think that's the first thing that I always say is, I wouldn't say loves it, but everybody does it, or at least thinks that they should do it, right? The joke right around now inside the gym space is, like the street parking thing, the anti-New Year's resolution thing. Like we know they're coming, right? Or some version of that. Because at this time of year, everybody tends to be like, oh, that sucked. I'd like next year to not suck. And so we start setting some goals, which is great. I think if everybody did that and then they did that correctly, we'd probably be set up for a lot of success. But a big piece of that is that part that Andrew just said, which is, in order to figure out how to go forward, you're going to have to do some degree of looking back. And I think this is a big piece of it that most people don't necessarily understand in the beginning. It's something that myself personally, I struggled with forever. I think in business, everybody gets around like annual meetings, quarterly meetings. They understand this idea of these things. And, for years, I committed to the cadence. But there wasn't a lot of reflection aside from pulling some metrics or some benchmarks from the last year. And while even that's better than doing nothing, most of everything was focused on moving forward. And so the first big piece of the conversation is like, how do you look backward to start to look forward? Because I think that's a big piece of it that's missing. Lots of people love to set these pie in the sky sort of goals or reflections, but if we don't first understand like what situation you're in or you've gotten yourself into, we can't necessarily figure out how to resolve that situation moving forward. And so you could be like, my goal is to be in a 7-bedroom home down by the lake by the end of next year. I'm like, you're in a trailer right now.
Yeah.
How did we get in the trailer in the first place?
And also, Tony, but I don't even know if you were setting yourself up to pump coaching. That can't be done without a coach.
Not
correct?
really well.
Well, I mean, how can it? If even if I was your coach, I'm Tony's life coach now today. He's like, oh God, he's like, that's the last guy ever hired.
Can I sit in and watch those calls?
Yeah, he's just trauma tempting me with those donut signs behind him.
It's like you actually can't be the observer in your review. You're too biased. It's like biting your own like finger. Isn't that? I don't know if that's true or not, but it's like a carrot. Technically, you could bite through it as easy as a carrot, but like your brain won't allow you. Is that? I don't know if that's real. Somebody maybe comment or let us know. But like, even if I'm bad at coaching, I'd still do probably a better job being another human's coach, even if it's Tony, who's really good at this sort of stuff, because I'm over here and he's there. Am I wrong? I could be wrong, but like you guys do this way more. You see way more.
And it's that having someone sit external, because as humans we will believe our own bullshit and we'll write whatever narrative makes us feel better. That whole concept of when you're a baby, you're taught to self-soothe, and we carry that through life doing it. This is the reason we can justify the shit out of anything that'll make us feel better, or maybe that's just me, I don't know. But when you've got someone sitting external who's going to go, well, why is that the case? Why are you saying that? Why is that important to you? Why do you think that's? And just asking those questions, you need someone who has that clarity, who's not telling the same story. And they've got no investment in the answer. They just want you to own your answer. And that's the power of the reflection, not just review, ticking boxes.
I think to answer your question, Andrew, you could do it without a coach. It's a skill. I don't think it's not something you'll be good at. Just like you can just go to .com and go out to your garage and start working out.
Right.
You're still going to be better off than doing nothing. So it's not necessarily a decree that it's a failure if you don't have a coach, but it's the Hawthorne effect in any area. It's any coach to any relative degree, great or otherwise, simply just being in a position to observe and watch another person changes everything about both the person that shows up as well as the outcome. And I think to that point of it, it wasn't necessarily meant to be a plug for coaching, but for sure, having somebody review the process or guide the process, or, even just ask questions about the process is far more valuable. And so if you don't have a coach, just eliciting a buddy, right? I mean, go in the Founders League, make friends with somebody, be like, hey, I'm going to work through this thing, because you get access to it through the Founders League. That is a plug. But find a friend in there and be like, hey, Andrew, would you like to trade these at the end of this process so we can look at them both? And just simply having that accountability buddy, that thunder buddy, there's a pun in there, is helpful. Having somebody who knows the process obviously is a little bit more helpful.
Have you ever had someone do so? The first time someone did that to me, Danny Urico, Julie Boucher's ex-husband, he was my doctor when that whole doctor thing came out. And I remember he texted me and said, hey, I need an accountability buddy. I can text every morning about something I want to work on. Will that be you? And I was shocked. I was like, what the fuck is this? Is this a new thing? He actually is going to, and he's like, well, is there anything you want to hold yourself accountable to do in the morning that might be valuable to your life? And I was like, I don't know. This was when Wim Hof just came out. I was like, I guess I could try this breathing thing, and so I texted him every morning how long I held my breath for the third interval. And he texted me, I don't know if he was reading or what the hell was he doing, something. But even that, I was just like, wow, this is unreal. The accountability. So I totally agree with Tony. How many people in those Founders League? I mean, it's such a small group right now. We're all so confused because we're like, well, they're having the conversations that actually help, or they at least have the mindset of the people who want to have the conversations to help. Finding one person in there, my God, I feel like that's just the way to go.
Yeah, I think even to the point that you were just saying, like having somebody reach out, you don't have to go through the same program. This is kind of aside from reflection and goal setting, but like if Andrew and I decide, hey, on Thursdays, do you want to virtually meet up and work together? Just turn the screen on, whatever. We don't have to talk, but even just simply being in the same place at the same time, virtually or otherwise, is a real easy hack to increase productivity very substantially. Just again,
Really?
it's just the Hawthorne effect in practice. It's a big thing in the tech world. It can obviously, you can imagine, can get very distracting if people start turning their microphones on and start sharing memes back and forth. But yeah, I mean, but it's that exact same thing, right? You can send out that text message each morning. You could have that phone call a couple of times a week. You could do that virtual co-working space. There's lots of things you can do. But the point of this, I guess, is that a coach is great, but the barrier to entry is relatively low. Just text a friend, right? Do this thing and give it to your significant other. Do this thing and give it to your partner. Do this thing and give it to a friend. Don't give it to a friend. Just ask them, hey, what is your goal setting routine for the end of the year?
And it is having that, you can be working on something different, but having that shared, well, it's a bit like in the CrossFit gym, isn't it? It's that shared suffering. We're working on different goals, but we're working on it together. And we, in a CrossFit gym, we're all in the same room, but you can achieve the same thing. Doesn't matter where you are located with somebody, 150%. But this is where we get back to some of our earlier episodes and themes and conversations about being vulnerable enough to ask and make the ask. Now, in our school group, the group of humans in there, no one's going to say, no, screw you. People are going to embrace that opportunity. So you have to make sure that you surround yourself with the right humans that aren't going to drop the ball on you, or aren't going to, if you're not going to pay for a coach, but you're going to look for a thunder buddy, that they're not going to drop the ball on you. You've got to choose the right people.
Yeah. What do you look for in a human, to either of you, that allows you to be like, this person is vulnerable enough to be of value for me to share maybe my goals? You know what I mean? Like, because that's kind of a unique, I'm not saying this is like choosing a life partner, husband, wife, whatever. It's like, I mean, but it's close. Like if you're gonna really open up and settle, like I don't know. Is there any
when you know,
qualities? I know.
Yeah, when I had the affiliate, like I worked with several different people, and I knew very quickly, like, this is not for me. When someone started saying to me the way to grow my gym was to stand out the front with a sandwich board, I was like, this has run its course. This is thanks 1985. Here I come. Like, and you would, it's the same as when you got a date with somebody. You sort of pick up, is this worth investigating further? The first conversation I had with Affiliate and Tony, I was like, just get down on one knee, dude. Let's go do this. Like, I found my one. Because from, if they are being transparent and open with you, and that they're talking from a place of authenticity and integrity and genuine care for you, it's incredibly apparent that, like, this is where I need to push my energy.
Yeah, but that's the fastest way to not sell tickets. Do you know what I mean? I mean, that's the hardest part. And
yeah,
man, that hit hard, because good always prevails, but when it comes to certain aspects of business and marketing, and this is where I know, when people ask me, what does affiliate do, this is where I have that conversation. And I know this is the hardest thing, is like, when someone truly cares about your well-being, that you don't plaster that on a billboard. It's just because instantly you're taking yourself and you're saying, well, let me sell you something because I can help you. At the end of the day, true, genuine care my favorite thing Tony says to when I hear him talk to people, or I've heard him talk to a lot of people before. I've been in a room with him while he's talking, and when he says, like, you're the mentor,
Mm.
I'm here coaching, but like I teach you how to even find mentors if that's your ultimate goal. Kind of like the "I'm not your guru" thing. I did like that when Tony Robbins put that as a title. That was a good title.
Yeah.
You guys got to admit that was a good title.
That was a good title. It was, helping, and we talk about this, and Tony talks about this all the time on the podcast, is by him saying that, like, I'm not your guru, he's encouraging people to take agency over making their own change.
Mm.
And the same as, when we've talked here, or, I've posted stuff in the school group about, my journey recently, and Tony's like, you're giving me way too much credit for my part in your journey. Like, you did all the things. You had to be open to the change. You had to do the things. I just sat by and listened and asked you the questions, kind of thing. Even though from a participant perspective, that was incredibly powerful for me to have that. But, it gave me agency and control that I did the things.
Mm.
Does that make sense?
Just getting to shower Tony with compliments today.
Oh, today it's
Let's sit there and
raining
take 'em.
compliments. See, it's Christmas. It's my
Everybody
gift
just
to him.
pissing on my back trying to convince me it's raining. I think moving away from the conversation of like getting a thunder buddy and accountability buddy, although everybody probably should have that key person in their life. And I think, again, to iterate, what you just said, Andrew, or how do you assess them? I honestly think, I think most people would be well served to explore vulnerability a little bit more. And I know that feels a little bit emotional in this sort of conversation, but I think if we step away from that, it's important to kind of understand why goal setting and reflection is so important. I know what it's like to be any single one of anybody that's listening to this or anybody that's on here, to go to bed at night and be like, what the fuck just happened? Right. And then also like, what the fuck am I going to do tomorrow? Right. Yeah. And then repeat that potentially 365 days out of the year for a pursuit of something that you decided to partner with, in terms of a mission, vision, values of like, okay, I guess this is just Tuesday. And so the point of even referencing that is that there's a handful of things at your disposal that you can use to break that routine, some tools to deploy. In this case, one of those huge tools is like it's kind of a milestone sort of moment. It's a bus stop, so to speak. And that's the end of the year. I mean, everybody's doing it. It's just, there's a way that you can do it effectively better, because what we're really talking about, being an entrepreneur, you move through what is effectively called like the emotional phases of business. And like people have probably heard like conscious incompetence and, all those other versions, but that's not really the same thing. In business, it looks like phase one being uninformed optimism is what it's referred to as, where it's like, this is going to be awesome, right? You move into that and everything starts, you buy the stuff, you get the rogue, you get the things, you open the door, and then you move into informed pessimism. What the fuck? Like, where is everybody? I built my field of dreams. They're not coming out, right? Like, how do I get them out of there? And then you move into where I would say the bulk of the affiliates live today, because it takes a timeline thing, and that is the valley of despair. And in this valley, everybody's raining down on you. Not only gurus, mentors trying to sell you advice and salvation, but you've got friends, family, significant others being like, what the fuck are you doing with your life? Right? Like, you have all of these things and they're getting louder and louder and louder. But it's kind of like an inverse bell curve, right? It starts here, drops down, but the way it starts to come back up, the way you get on the front side of that bell curve is through better conversations with yourself. Right. And it is about changing situations and in changing environments to change outcomes. And there's not really a better time of the year to move into what is like phase 4 and beyond, because phase 4 is the opposite of phase 2. And that's informed optimism. You're like, okay, I got a plan, right? This is how it's been. Sucks. Here's what we're going to do moving forward. And nothing really feels better than when you get this all together and you put it together and you come out the backside of this process, which I advocate for. Leave your gym, leave your office, leave your home, go away, go to the mountains, go to someplace safe where you can get out of your environment to truly visualize your outcome, and spend a few days doing it, or a week. like I've done every year for 10 years now. And
1 week? You do one full week?
yeah.
Where?
I usually end up in Hawaii, but then last year I went to Whistler.
Oh man,
and
I got to
so-
get a documentary on this. Can you just grab a GoPro and then you don't have to
Yeah.
like know what's going on or ever review it. I just want to see it, you know.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, most of this stuff takes like 5 minutes a day. The rest of it is like, let's just see if I can run up this trail as far as I can. But to get into informed optimism, I think sets you up for success to move into the future, success and fulfillment, which is phase 5, right? But you can't get out of the valley of despair until you got a plan of action. And you can't have a plan of action until you've both had an assessment on the years that have been or the year that it has been, but then creating a plan moving forward. And so there's kind of a framework for it. And the best thing to do is, I don't suspect anybody's booking a flight right now to go spend some time anywhere, but find a friend, get in the Founders League, take advantage of this thing. You can have access to it and then work through it that way. It's not that difficult to do. It's actually quite fun, and you can do it by yourself. You can just go to a coffee shop. But the thing that's important, the single biggest piece I'll tell you, is that you have to get out of normalcy, out of home, out of office, out of the gym, out of some place that you're normally at, so that you can think about the future, not respond to today.
Wow, well said. I don't think people even take into account what you just said of like getting out of your normal house. You get into that rat race of like even similar smells, sounds, things you see. Like, yeah.
I've done my best work when like I can power through 2 hours of writing in the coffee shop, which would be the equivalent of 5 or 6 hours grinding away at home, just by being in that different environment that I don't have the normal pings and dings. And your brain, because it's a new environment, just you give it permission to run free. And I think we've talked about it on the podcast before, but there's so much power in changing your environment and just going to do one piece of intentional work. So if there's something you're stuck on, and you know, some of the power of this yearly reflection, which Tony just touched on as well, is when he said, look back on the year and years. So the more that you do this, you have a huge database behind you. And one of the most powerful things is comparing, you know, to the year before and the year before that. And then, because sometimes when we are in the valley of despair, everything sucks, everything's hard, I'm a failure. But when you look at it over the course of previous, you know, cycles, you're like, oh, well, shit, I have moved forward, hopefully. Even if it's a foot, a millimeter, I have moved forward. And that gives you some of that clarity to keep going.
Yeah. Essentialism. I keep getting reminded of that. And the article Tony sent me the one time, can't remember, he probably remembers it, but when I read it, and then I had a person argue before on minimalism and essentialism are different, but it was kind of a conversation. And essentialism, if we do that too much, that is how not Buddha. There was like, that's how that culture, what's the culture that didn't care about anything? Stoicism.
Mm.
That's how they finally were overthrown, because they were so content on everything and confident in the present that it was just like, well, it's no big deal. Like, this is it. And so I sometimes wonder the comfort crisis. I talked to Tony about that the other day. Like, how do these things play into a yearly review? And man, who are you? I don't know. You guys do more yearly reviews than I do. Like, is that a common thing where people are in some sort of, I know we're ending on getting closer to time, so I don't want to go too crazy, but is that something you see? It's like concrete. They're concrete at the end of the year. Or I don't know. I would assume.
I mean, the people who start it and they get it, they're not usually willing to give it up because it's such a huge superpower. And it, like any skill, it certainly is something you have to invest in and get better and better at. Like, for me, when I started this process, like I said, it was not a success. Like, I started kind of like everybody did, being like, all right, let's just go set the goals. And there was a huge piece of it that was missing in there. And part of that was understanding those emotional phases of business. Like I was essentially I was focused on escapism as opposed to arrival to some degree. And because of that, like my only reflection was like, okay, don't want that again. But the big part of reflection is not just like look back on the year, what the hell happened. And it's broken into, when done correctly, into key segments: positive, negative reflection, which is fascinating for the record to go through. It's also focused on like gratitude reflection and looking at like things that you probably wouldn't pay attention to. Because surprisingly, I mean, that's a buzzword these days, but gratitude's usually like, it's whimsical, it's esoteric, right? But then it moves into sort of like constructive reflection. And these are all skills, like to look back positively, negatively, reflect on gratitude, to become constructive with your reflection. That's all takes investment. But just like CrossFit, doing a workout bad is way better than what the average person's doing in the gym well. Right. And so to your point, Andrew, like, do people do this all the time? No, I think that they start, but they don't really invest in the skill. I think a lot of people set goals. I think they set New Year's resolutions and things of that nature, but I don't think they truly respect it and appreciate it as an actual skill set, as an actual modality, so to speak, in your business, which is your ability to be both visionary as well as reflective. But that's the role that every single affiliate owner sits in, is that they must be the visionary, and they must also be the critical reflection of the business. And that's a hard place to be in if you're not investing in the skill of what that looks like.
I also think there's a unique, for the people who, because I feel like we're the typical fitness people, 3 fitness people talking about New Year's. Like it's always like a thing where we're like, people come do the thing, and it's like we do it all year. You know what's funny is when you use it in terms of what you just said, Tony. Like I know for me at this time in my life with 3 young kids and where I'm at, I haven't had one of those big moments of like change. My life has changed, but like where all of a sudden like I quit drugs today, or I did something like I'm gonna start fasting for 24 hours every other day today. Like I used to
live in your little neighborhood.
Yeah, like I used to do things like that all the time. And so like primally I look at it like, why hasn't something like that happened to me in years? And I think about it, it's not about me right now. I have things, but it is funny because I think when setting a goal, if you don't have that moment, or if it comes on December 30th, like it's probably fabricated a little bit, right? Like you might wake up in September and be like, I am going to 24-hour access only, no more CrossFit classes tomorrow. Like that's how you have to do. I'm not saying I've thought of it, but that's not something that I don't know. It just when it's on December 30th, it just seems fabricated.
Well, to that point, it is fabricated, and most people do. It is an afterthought. It's not a process. It's not a system. It's not something they're invested in, or they know that it's coming. And one of the things I tell people all the time is like, hey, this process starts in October. You start, gathering the firewood, so to speak, so that you can sit down wherever you're going to sit down and do this thing mindfully. That looks like, in October, you start booking, planning, and setting up the trip, et cetera, like, protecting that safe space. But like that aside, what ends up happening when it does last minute is they focus on like what would be considered like the meat and potatoes of it. And they're like, they just do goal setting. But this process is much bigger than goal setting. It's essentially a 3-part success setting. And then it starts, part 1 is, like we were just saying, reflection. And there's a process to that part, which is the goal setting, but a very specific goal setting, which is ecological goal setting. Because for 90% of people, if they do this and I ask them to turn it in, I will get a list of memetic goals, meaning they will look like versions of Andrew's success, being like, oh, I want that thing or this thing or that thing. And they have no direct implication or ties back to the quality of life of the person who's after them.
Now, Tony, is that because they do it? Sorry to cut you off. I don't want to ask specifically to that. Is that because they do it as a cram session? Do you think?
No, yes, because they don't know that there's more to it than that. But the main reason they do it is that if you ask a lot of people, what do you want in life? They can't tell you. They don't even know what ecology is, right? They can tell you memetics. They'll give me, I want 10 million. Where'd that number come from? I don't know. My financial advisor said that's the number I need, right? They'll tell me they want the house or the Range Rover, or the country club membership. They're all memetic goals because people don't spend enough time learning who they are to know what they are after and what's important and impactful to them. While that might sound esoteric, it's true. Ask yourself, like, what are you after? And then consider, is that a societally accepted norm? Or is that something that's truly impactful and individually valuable to you? And for most people, that's not the case. They're like, well, now when you put it that way, no, like everybody tells me numbers, 1 million, 5 million. If it's a round number, you're full of fucking shit. Or like there's no valid basis to that number if it's a round number. If it's down to the penny in the cent, like I'm sure it is for you, Andrew, and I've said this to you before, like now I know that number is tied to something real. It's tied to a plan, a strategy, and a reality that you have constructed in which when this number has achieved, this is what my life is going to look like. And this is the case for business owners, affiliate owners in specific, is that when setting ecological goals, we're talking about setting goals that look like this is what my life is going to look, feel, smell like, be like when these things are achieved. And then the third part of the process is having an implementation strategy. Right? So like those three things are all equally as important. But to your point, yeah, most cram it. They start in the middle. They're like, if there's one that's the most valuable, it's probably that one. The answer is it's not, because that's what most people do. And if we look around, 99.9% of people are busy being in reaction as opposed to traction. And the reason for that is that most people spend their days in their life responding to things because they're in pursuit of somebody else's things, right? They're in pursuit of memetic success and goals. And so they must continue to react, respond, and participate in their life as opposed to design, develop, and create their life, which is stepping into the active observer role, to go back to what Lisa was saying earlier. But it's really about setting an ecological pursuit of like, it's not about the money, it's not about the business, it's not about this, that, other thing. It's about all those things because of this thing, right? And we have to know what that is. That's why every client that starts here, they do start with ecology, right? We figure out what is the ecological pursuit that makes all of this shit that you're dealing with or you're going to deal with worth it. And if we can define that clearly, then we can start to look at like, okay, what are you doing in support of that? And that's where this starts to really come into play, is that at the end of each year or quarter or whenever you want to do it, it's resetting ecological goals, reflecting first, and then setting an implementation plan for the next month, 90 days, 1 year, etc.
You know why I said, because you said gathering the firewood in October. You know, I like to think of it as what was your state? I love the word state. You know, what was your state look like over the years? And it's funny because it's not a Wednesday if I don't mention crypto. This would be a great one to end it. But you know, one guy I put a lot of my faith in and net worth in over the last 7 years. He used to say you have to be writing and keeping an emotional journal on your purchases, on your sells. He's like, because when you've done this twice, like I'm in my third run, something creeps in, and then you can refer back to, this is how I felt when this happened. Everybody probably knows today they can open their phone or news and see all this stuff everywhere. But like, I remember having to purchase things after everything was going bankrupt, and it didn't feel good. And then everybody looks at you now and they'll be like, "Oh, you're so smart." I'm like, I didn't feel smart. I felt like the dumbest person on planet Earth. See, it's written right here. It's written. You know what I mean? Like, and I wonder if people. I want to like journaling personally. I don't do it. I've tried it. I think it's because I have some deeper issues probably to work out. I probably should be journaling, but like, I like how Tony just said that. If that's what I meant by cramming, because then like, oh, man, my coach, he's going to have me write his goal. I'm probably just like, on today, what does it smell like? What does it look like? What do I feel like? That's how I'm writing my goals down. And then it's just like, you just wasted a whole year.
Yeah. And then you know, when you write that goal and someone goes, well, that's a great memetic goal, but what does it add to your life and why does it matter to you? That's the power of having someone sit opposite you that has the skill to ask that right question. And you realize, I just crammed for the test and I just gave the, you know, a little of column A, a little of column B. And that's, I don't know where that number came from or whatever. So that's the power of that. And I think we've circled back to that
I
deeper
think
stuff
there's a big
today.
piece of that too that is probably a good closing part of it, to Andrew's financial portion of it, which like this, whether it's business, whether it's investment, whether it's working, whether it's being a father, whether it's being, you know, a husband, the emotional stages are the same, right? Like you meet your significant other, uninformed optimism, right? That valley of despair gets real no matter what the relationship is. Same with like, I'm going to be a dad. 3 weeks into, you're like, somebody give me a pillow. Right? Like everything becomes the same. What this is, in all things like this, are hedges. They're hedges for you to step outside of the emotion and to step out of the reaction, step out of the distraction and into the stability, right? In it's not necessarily a stoic thing, but sure, it's a big piece of it, right? It's the ability to remain steadfast in the face of adversity when everybody else is yelling fire, right? You know that if you've got your fireproof underwear on, you're probably safe, right? And that's really what this whole process is about, is putting on your scratchy fireproof Nomex underwear. But the point of this whole process, in any process like it, whether it be end of the year, daily, weekly, quarterly, whatever that is to, the value of ecology is that it stabilizes your traction. Because for most people, when we set memetic goals, we're choosing to partner instead with emotion, versus when we set ecological goals, we're pairing instead with a plan. And that's a very big difference. Most people are emotionally in pursuit of avoiding or getting out of their situation and chasing somebody else's situation, because they're like, once I have that, life's going to be good. Spoiler, it's not. Until you decide what your life actually needs to look like and go after that thing. But that requires, first, you have to figure out who you are.
And I think that's a very powerful note to stick a pin in it. So for those of you listening, if you have no idea where to start this process, reach out, join the school group. That's where you will find a group of people all working through the same things. So hit us up, follow us on socials, and we'll see you for season 4.
Wow.
Yeah. Thanks, boys.
Season 4.
Arrivederci.